Today we have a man named Gun Reuter on the show. He's the CEO of an apple juice brand. It's called Martinelli's. I'm sure you've seen it on shelves in the grocery store. I first started drinking Martinelli's apple juice when I genuinely started looking at the labels in the store in a beverage industry that is dominated by corn syrup additives, concentrates. Martinelli's is rooted and continues to stay rooted in traditional pressing methods and long-term relationships with American orchardists. I find this story fascinating and think that it's an example of proving that scale does not have to mean abandoning stewardship. We chat about the intersection of heritage farming, brand longevity, and the evolving American beverage landscape. Please join me in welcoming Gun Reuter. First thing, is there anything about yourself that I would not get off the internet that you would love to share with listeners?
Let's see. Well, I worked and lived in Japan. I don't know if this is on the internet, but I worked and lived in Japan for 6.5 years between college and grad school, and traveled as part of that job to over 40 countries around the
Wow,
world. And so that was a very formative time in my life, kind of.
that's beautiful. Amazing.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that'll definitely shape your perspectives for sure. So I would love to chat about what drew you, because of what I have read online,
sure.
what drew you to a heritage apple juice company after
Yeah,
years in the finance consulting world?
yeah. I was looking for a role where I could really help manage and build business. And I knew of the brand, like many people know of the brand, and had a opportunistic conversation with the then CEO of Martinelli's, and they were looking for a successor to take over the company. And originally, my conversations with John Martinelli at the time were focused on uh, helping with the search because I didn't have a background in manufacturing or farming or food. As I became more aware of what the company was looking for, some of the challenges it was facing, opportunities it had in front of it, and as the family came to understand my background a little bit, what I was all about, they asked if I'd be interested in throwing my hat in the ring.
Mm.
What drew me to the company was great respect for the brand, great respect for the family, and as I went through the process, the connection with both agriculture and manufacturing and consumer products were fascinating and of interest in terms, and very different from what I had experienced and been exposed to in the past. And despite the family and the business being around for a long time, doing what they've been doing since 1868, there was tremendous opportunity to help bring the company and the business forward to make sure that it could be sustainable and resilient and survive another 150 years. So that passion around an iconic brand, a connection to agriculture and to something that I think is so fundamental to who we are as a nation and as a country and as a society, uh, and a real interesting challenge to make sure that this legacy could be sustainable for generations to come was so unique to other opportunities that I was looking at the time that it really became quite exciting and interesting to take on this kind of challenge and opportunity.
That was a beautiful answer. Before you, most of the people in leadership were all family members, right?
So before me, the CEO, the person running the business, had always been a family member.
Mhm.
So there were four generations of Martinelli's that ran the business before me. I was the first non-family CEO to run the business. The executive team over the generations had other family members engaged, but there were also non-family members in the executive team. And then the business more broadly, as you went down through the organization, was primarily made up of non-family members. But it had always been and remains a family-owned business. So 100% of the shareholding of Martinelli's is Martinelli family members.
Hmm.
And right now, interestingly, the board is 100% family. The chairman of the board is family. Is John Martinelli, who used to be the CEO and president. But there's only one family member in the business now. And yeah, I think the family would love it if there were another family CEO. And so amongst the fifth generation, which fifth generation is anywhere from kind of mid to late 20s to late 30s, they would love to see somebody emerge from that generation to potentially take the company forward after me at some point.
I know that Martinelli's is a unique business and a unique type of farm, but it is a very common story in the agricultural world that the next generation is not interested, doesn't want to continue, and then the brand dies off.
Yeah,
And so I have really loved like following and learning about this story and that you were able to kind of come in and be that like that next person to carry it on. But
yeah.
I imagine that has not been very easy. It's not easy even amongst family jumping into
Right.
who even knows like all the dynamics.
Yeah,
What, especially when you first started,
yeah,
because so many people who are entering into the agricultural world are coming into very similar situations. If even if they're
yeah,
not the CEO, they may be working with a bunch of family dynamics. As an outsider, how did you navigate that at first? The
yeah,
tensions and learning curves and everything.
yeah. Yeah, there, as you stated, as you I'm sure talked to with other people, it's very challenging. There is a such a deep amount of assumed trust in family relationships. And when that you have a business that's family run, creates kind of a shorthand, I guess, if you will, between or assumed trust between the CEO and the board when they're all from the same family.
Mhm.
And coming in as a CEO without that bond, certainly I felt that well, I'm obviously an outsider to the business, but there was a real I felt not suspicion is maybe too strong a word to be honest, Hannah, but a need to prove myself that I was worthy. And in my past, even in more entrepreneurial ventures, but certainly when I was at larger companies and consulting, the way you prove yourself is by working really hard and being really clever about your analytics and how you put forward solutions to problems and how you build teams and kind of the structure and form of what you do to execute business. It was really important that, well, I that's what I did here at Martinelli's. And I did good work and I think they recognized I did good work, but it was not breaking down that trust. So I really had to develop a more holistic approach to communicating around the business and
Mhm.
being much more vulnerable as a leader with the board, not presenting that, well, I've done all the analytics. This is the answer. I know this is the answer, and this is what we have to do, especially when those recommendations were not intuitive to the board. That
Right.
storytelling and vulnerability and portraying what we were doing in the context of a generational journey versus a discrete business solution or business problem to be solved was really important for the board to develop a comfort level for me and to gain trust in me and to understand what I was, my vision and what I was trying to do versus just overwhelming them with the analytics and the quality of the thought, if you will. So it was really a helpful evolution and broadening of my skill set and how I communicate and how I built relationships with the board on a more personal level and at a more emotional level than
Yeah.
just on pure transactional business level, if that makes sense.
That really does make sense. It's very fascinating. My husband, he's not a farmer, but in his line of work, he's in a family owned business surrounded by all family members of all generations. And he had the same experience. He came in kind of swinging, like trying to hit all the measurements and prove himself in
Yeah,
all these ways. And he's found that like really just coming in as like a nurturer and,
yeah,
because previously with family relationships, they're not always looking at the metrics, just like you said. I'd love for you to share a little bit for listeners who are not familiar with Martinelli's, kind of some of the strong points of the brand, some of the
yeah,
history that really stands out and makes you guys unique that they may not be familiar with.
yeah. So Martinelli's has been around since 1868. So we're 100 and what does that make us? 158-year-old business. We're in our fifth generation in terms of shareholders. There is a sixth generation that's on the way, but they're pretty small right now. So that first and foremost, we're family owned to what we've talked about to this point, that there is a passion, a care, and a generational continuity to Martinelli's that is very unique. We are very, very tightly connected to the orchards. We manage and grow about 800 acres of apples in the Pajaro Valley, where we're located in the central coast of California. We have cultivated and sustained some heirloom varieties that are very important for us to maintain our distinct flavor profile. One of the challenges for us is as our business grew, there was a need to look beyond the apples in the Pajaro Valley to make sure we could continue to grow because we don't use concentrate. We are 100% juice, so it's all from fresh pressed, 100% US grown apples. So as our business grew and we needed to source apples, we also had to develop relationships with growers in Washington. And we have developed really strong relationships with a variety of different growers, but two very close relationships, one of which is Stemelt, which is also a fourth generation family owned grower in Washington, who we really culturally aligned with. But it was a priority for us as we think about our products that we are using 100% juice and that our apples are always from fresh pressed apples, which is critical, and that we have control over the varieties of our juice. One of the, I guess it's a fun fact or something that's probably is little known, is in every bottle of juice that we make, there are at least 5 varieties of apples included in those products,
Wow.
and often as many as 10 to 15. It is a much more complex balancing act to maintain and achieve our flavor profile when you're working with multiple different varieties that have different components of sweetness and tartness and acidity, and that year to year, depending on growing conditions, those attributes may change. So we have a team that is really working with varieties, working with growers, understanding the unique aspects of the fruit, so that every week we're developing a blend of apples from Washington and from Pajaro Valley that can create the blend and the consistency of superior taste that we try to achieve. And it's
Yeah.
very complicated, and the recipe changes all the time because apples change year to year in terms of their tartness, sweetness, and different other conditions that impact growing of the apples. So that for us is where the magic is that connection with the orchards, that understanding of apples, and that blending of apples dynamically through the year to maintain consistency and superior flavor. So I tell you, it's a lot more complicated than I thought it was, Hannah, when I came
Yeah.
here. And it's a lot of fun though, because it's a real craft. And that to me is what also attracted me to the business, that there's nothing formulaic about making what we make, at least in the style that we make it, from fresh apples, multiple varieties, and only US grown. It's really important, but it's very, very complicated to maintain that consistency when you're dealing with as many varieties of those apples as that we do.
Can you kind of give us maybe a little glimpse into how that is different from the apple juice people may be familiar with? Like if they're
Sure.
not buying, if they're not buying Martinelli's, if they're just buying the
Right.
concentrate apple juice, like how
Yeah.
many apples does that normally make? Do you know that those kind of details?
Sure. So, and I certainly know the details. I won't name any competitors by name. I won't do
Yeah.
that. But I know the process when you're concentrating apples. What happens is the growers, large growers and packing houses in Washington will have fruit that they send to processing. So they're for apple juice or sliced apples, not for sale in the fresh market. The folks that then there are companies that will either directly concentrate for their juice or will be concentrating for sale to people that use concentrate. And they take those apples, whatever's coming off the lines, you concentrate them by introducing either heat or other factors of how you concentrate down. You remove a lot of the moisture, the water, but you're using usually one variety of apple, maybe a couple, because you're just taking whatever's coming off the line. And these packing houses will pack one variety continuously for days. You take that, you concentrate it, you ship it in barrels, goes to the bottling location. They add back water to reconstitute it to 100% juice level based on the ratios to achieve different Brix, pH, and acidity, and then you bottle it. So there's usually heat is introduced and you concentrate down to a concentrated apple juice that's then reconstituted by adding water somewhere else. For us, we're taking fresh apples, we're then pressing those apples, we're taking that juice and we're putting that juice into a bottle. So we are doing it without the introduction in the pressing process or to without the introduction of heat. And we're doing it, the time between apple to bottle for us is about 3 hours. And that's what we try to achieve. Certainly when we're running and pressing at our plant here in Watsonville, we're able to get it into the bottle as quickly as we can. And that limits the ability for any kind of impurities or oxidation to happen. But we think the best juice gets to the bottle as quickly as it can after you press it, and not having to concentrate it, reconstitute it, and all the right. That process, in our estimation, and why we don't do that, is it strips away a lot of the unique aromatics of the apple. It also limits the diversity of the robust mouthfeel and the diversity of varieties that you can introduce into the process to achieve that real robust apple flavor that we try to strive for. So it feels like you're eating an apple when you're
it's so
drinking our
crisp.
juice. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
definitely. So essentially, you were hired, you've been trusted to guide this company, this
Yes.
like heirloom heritage apple juice maker,
Hmm.
to a more modern business with new product lines. I know some listeners that might make them like a little nervous, especially farmers. A lot of us are so used to being like stuck in the rhythms and really weary of big changes. How have you been able to, or how do you strive to, like feasibly maintain that quality, the heritage, authenticity, and like you were just sharing, that famous Martinelli's flavor
Yeah.
while continuing to scale as necessary?
Yeah. For us, two things. While I was hired to modernize the company, the real priority was to modernize the production infrastructure and the management team so that we had a better capability to deal with a very dynamic consumer products and beverage kind of world around us. And so we had to build better marketing skills, better sales skills. We had to be more robust in terms of how we developed our people functions so that we could compete and hire the right talent. So the first priority was to establish a much stronger, more capable foundation in our business to keep doing what we were doing. So I don't want to give the impression that I was brought in to completely change what we're doing and chart a new course. It was we needed to strengthen the company just to be able to keep doing what we're doing and deliver that best product possible.
Right.
The second part of it is, as we think about the quality of our products, we have been really focused on those that we think are most true to who we are. So as an example, in 2024, we reintroduced a hard cider. So we're an apple
Wow.
company. We didn't make hard cider for the last 40 years. We actually made it in our history, but on the last 40 years, we felt that to make a great hard cider, you need to know how to get the best apples, how to keep those apples as fresh as possible before they're ultimately introduced into the production process, and make sure that you didn't introduce any other flavorings or preservatives or whatever you need to do to keep it as pure to what the apple truly is. So
Mm-hmm.
for us, it is a new product line. We sell it to a different buyer, to a different consumer at a different time of day and a different event, but it's grounded in the same principles as our core business, which is sourcing the best apples, making sure it's as clean a product as possible, and that it's really leveraging the skills, the knowledge, and the relationships that we have.
Yeah.
And so that's true even within our apple juice products, and our innovation to date has been largely grounded in our knowledge of apples and knowledge of fruit, and making 100% juices that are high quality and that serve the needs of our consumers in different need states. This is innovation, but it's more of a packaging innovation that we never made products in cans. So in 2025, last year, we introduced a canned 8.4 ounce canned sparkling cider. So it's our same sparkling cider, but making it in cans that's more user friendly to take on the go at schools and at venues than our glass bottles are for our consumers on the sparkling side. So the first horizon of opportunity is very tightly grounded in who we are as a company. We are exploring where can we go that maintains that truth to our brand, truth to our skills, truth to that quality,
Yeah.
but maybe beyond 100% juice. But
Hmm.
it will always be grounded in juice. It'll always be grounded in that connection with growers and understanding the qualities of the fruit that we're putting in any product. So there are a few precepts or few beliefs that will never change, and that's it's got to be grounded in juice. Maybe not 100% juice, but actual real juice. It's
Yeah.
got to be exceptionally high quality and flavor, and that it resonates with consumers that Martinelli's would make it. So there are certain categories of product that may be high growth, maybe super profitable, but we're not going to go in that direction because we don't feel it's true to who we are, and we don't feel we have distinct capabilities of producing.
Yeah. Interesting. That kind of leads me to asking my food system questions. Because, like you said, you didn't come from a food system background. So, how has your overarching view of the food systems farming, how has that changed since you stepped into this role and kind of, at least with apples, like seeing a behind the scenes?
Yeah,
And for a huge company like Martinelli's, I mean, I'm sure you're seeing a lot of food system
yeah,
stuff.
yeah. Well, as you know, and I don't come from this industry originally, so everything was an education, and that's how I approached the job broadly, but certainly as it pertained to the food system and growing apples and growing other products that we used was to talk to growers, to get out and meet different people, our own growers, third party growers, really understand what the issues are, what the opportunities are, and how we can create a food system that ensures the highest quality product and ensures that our growers are paid in a way that allows them to survive and thrive, and which is hard to do in California
Mhm.
and hard in our area of California along the coast, and also I think in other areas of the country where the agricultural community is under a great deal of stress. And for us, one thing that helps is we're never, given that we don't use concentrate, given that we don't use foreign concentrate or foreign apples, that we are always going to support our local growers, the growers that obviously orchards that we control, but also the orchards that we don't. We need to make sure that the high quality fruit, the fruit that is being invested into and that our growers are committed to, that we're purchasing it at a wage at a price, I should say, that is sustainable. So we pay our local growers on a per ton basis. It varies with harvest, mainly from what the price of fruit that you can buy over the scale, let's say off of packing lines in the Northwest, anywhere from 5 to 8 times what per ton what is paid for processing fruit in the Northwest. We pay to our local growers
Mm.
because we need to make sure that they can compete and stay in business. Yeah, the other part of this for us is to make sure that as we plant new orchards, it's not only sustainable for the growers, but it's sustainable for the labor that's harvesting and pruning and tending the orchard. So old apple orchards used to be 20 feet tall, big expanse, and I'm talking in the coastal valley here, 120 trees to an acre. That required people getting up and down ladders, really complicated to prune, harvest, and whatnot. The new orchards that we're planting are we plant dwarf stock, shorter, smaller trees that you don't often require getting up and down ladders. They're much more dense, so you can get more efficiency, more product picked per hour than you could working with the old style. So instead of 128 trees per acre, we're planting at 400, 420 trees per acre. So it looks almost more like an apple vineyard than it does an apple orchard, to make it easier and more accessible to pick and to harvest and to cultivate than the old style of growing those trees. There are other elements that we've tried to introduce ways to limit the amount of pesticides and chemicals that we put on our orchard. So all of our orchards have owl boxes on them where the habitat for owls was declining as we convert more agricultural acreage to homes in this area. But we've kind of provided habitat while at the same time limiting the amount of chemicals we need to use to control rodents because
Right.
the owls do it for us. Then more on a macro level, what I came to understand again in this area where throughout California, water is an issue. On the coast, it's a little different than the Central Valley, but along the coast here, what's really important is the amount of draw we have on our aquifer. And apples in this area use much less water than other agricultural products in this area. So we're using, let's say, a half to 1 acre foot per year. Other row crops and berries that are grown in this area can use 1.5 to 2 up to 3 acre feet per area. So having the mix of agricultural products here where we have orchards as well as row crops and as well as berries and other things, it allows better management of the aquifer. And we feel like we play a pretty important role in maintaining that diversity so that we're not overtaxing our local aquifer.
Interesting. What other things, what else does kind of sustainability mean to Martinelli's? These are some great examples. Are there any other examples of things that sustainability really means to you guys?
Yeah, for us, packaging is an area where we have really worked on sustainability. We're a company that our manufacturing plants are all in Watsonville, California, the Central Coast. We obviously have distribution everywhere. So how can we think through sustainability in terms of our supply chain and getting product to people? So you look at the majority of what we do is in glass. We've tried to work with and are working with our glass manufacturers to lightweight bottles, to take weight out of the bottles so that we can get more bottles onto a truck or onto a rail car. We've actually started to ship a lot more by rail than we have ever done in the past. We have a rail spur now that comes into the plant, and we try to maximize what we're sending outside of Watsonville to use that mode of transportation versus over the road on trucks. We've introduced, as I said, a canned product, which is lighter, much easier to recycle. And if you look at our single serve, which sparkling right now, it was all in glass before that can, and now we're really feel like the can is going to be a much more sustainable and also user-friendly option for our consumers. We are looking at another aspect of sustainability is our energy use, and we're evaluating opportunities in our plant and on our site to leverage solar. We don't have solar here yet, but we have a very large footprint. We have some issues with the strength of the roof of our facility, but we believe there's an opportunity to introduce solar power into the mix here to relieve our draw on the grid that we have to date. That's a big initiative for us. And on the farm, we're looking at different ways of managing and introducing different ways to keep the soils healthy that aren't necessarily the introduction of chemicals in terms of how we utilize cover crops in between rows and how we utilize different waste that comes off the trees to introduce more reinvigoration of the soil rather than introducing fertilizers and chemicals. Right. So there's a host of different activities we have across the board to improve our sustainability across the whole value chain from tree to consumer.
Mm-hmm. I had a couple kind of like final fun questions.
Sure.
Really just thinking about consumers and imagining that even the farmers listening, aside from maybe in the fall,
yeah,
people just might not be buying like really high quality apple juice.
Yeah.
And just thinking like you as the CEO of Martinelli's right now, what's one thing that you would desire for the average consumer to just like slow down long enough to appreciate in their food, in their apple juice, just in their consumption
in the
grocery store?
I wish people would really think about what they're purchasing. And so in food more broadly, not just apple juice, but really understand what it is they're buying and take the time to not only look at a label, but really understand the products from websites and research on their own. I know that people are going to become internet kind of sleuths on every company, but I wish there was more care and understanding of what goes into various products. And as that pertains to us, some of what we've already talked about, but I would love it if people understood the craftsmanship that goes into our product, the selection of varieties that changes week to week that we put into our product, and we choose the apples that go into our juice to create that distinctive flavor. And the fact that the only way you can do that is by ensuring that you're growing a lot of the apples you're utilizing. You're partnering directly with other farmers to bring in apples that you're not growing, and that all of that requires that it's 100% U.S. grown, because we know the regulations, we know what's being put on the product, we know the growers who are growing our product, and that we take great care to make sure that we take that apple from an apple to the bottle as quickly as possible.
Mhm.
And that it is different. Our process, the care, the time, the craftsmanship that goes into making Martinelli's is distinctive when you compare to our competitors who are using concentrate, often from foreign growers
Mhm.
of the making apple juice. So for me, it is all about the care and craftsmanship that have developed over 150 years of history making apple juice that creates a product that is truly distinct in the marketplace.
Yeah. You've spoken a few times about foreign grown apples and that being something in the apple industry. Do you know where most of them are coming from? Like, is the average person buying apple juice drinking foreign grown apples?
So what happens in many of the apple juices historically have been made from concentrate. Much of that concentrate was purchased from China and Turkey, a little bit from Poland as well. What I can't indict any of those products specifically, but there just isn't as much control and understanding of the growing practices in any of those countries.
Right.
Different regulations, different transparency to what people are importing. There's a nuance in the US labeling law that you can take concentrate from China, blend it with water, and as long as you blend that with water in the United States, you can
Mhm.
say it's a US product,
Yeah.
when the apples themselves were not grown in the US. That to me has been a frustration of people don't understand that. And it may be, if they understand it and they want to buy it, great, no problem with that. But I think there is a lack of understanding of where a lot of those products are coming from and what they're really buying when they're buying juices made from concentrate that are, yes, they say they're US products, but often they're not.
Mhm.
And that's something that I don't think the general consumer understands or knows.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's the same with like the beef industry.
Yeah,
Just as long as it's packaged here, it's just stamped USA. Yeah,
exactly.
I think that people would still, of course, buy it, but
Yeah,
just the average consumer feels kind of hoodwinked, like bamboozled.
right, right.
It is deceiving for sure.
Yeah,
People do like honesty and transparency.
I agree.
Could you share a couple more things about the Apple industry that most people would never guess?
Yeah, let's see. I
Good
would
or bad?
say,
Good or bad, anything.
yeah. No, I think what it impresses me when I learned more and expanded the relationships that we have up in the Northwest is the quality and the amount of research and development that goes into making apple varieties. The amount of care we take here, but I've learned in the industry more broadly in the Northwest, looking at rootstocks. You think of an apple tree, you plant a seed and it grows, but it's not. There are multiple different types of rootstocks, the root systems that you're grafting different varieties of trees to. You're then planting those trees and using those rootstocks that are specific to the types of soil that you're introducing those trees into. So the amount of science and research and development and energy that is spent to make the best possible apple starts with how you construct the tree with the roots and the varieties in concert with the soil. And then the varieties themselves, working with University of Minnesota, Washington State University, and other universities that really have a lot of research on apples about how do you make the best possible apple and taking the Honey Crisp and a Golden Delicious and blending them and breeding those together to make a new variety that has different attributes of sweetness and tartness,
Yeah.
and how there's so much effort and so much research and development to make really fantastic apples, not only for the fresh market, but that we get to benefit from on the juice side as well. And you think it's apple juice. It's been around for a long time. You buy an apple at the store. You've been doing this for generations. How much has it changed? It changes all the time. It's really, really interesting how much time, effort, and science is involved in making the best possible apple juice from the best possible apples.
Yeah. Pretty amazing. This past fall, I spent a month in Vermont and visited, it was peak apple season, and visited a lot of apple orchards and learned so much about the grafting, but also just all the heirloom varieties. It was
Yeah,
really eye-opening, and listeners got to hear about all of that. So I think they'll be kind of
yeah.
remembering back to those interviews.
It reminds me of another thing I was going to mention in terms of dynamics that I never thought of about the Apple industry that impact what you see in the store and where other people are getting their apples from to make juice or their concentrate to make juice. In the 70s, before they had automated packing lines, a lot of the heirloom varieties that taste fantastic, you'd see in the store
Yeah.
because the packing lines and the packing process was more manual. What happened, certainly in our local community here, when you started automating the packing lines, they had uniform size of sort of cups where the apples kind of flow over their conveyance system. So there was an apple that we still plant and use called the Mutsu. It's giant, tastes
Mm.
fantastic, but it used to be sold in stores in up through the 70s.
Yeah.
Now you can never find it in the store because it's too big for the automated conveyance. We love it from a juice perspective, but you can't find it anywhere else. Similarly, there's another apple that we use, the Newtown Pippin, which is really an heirloom variety. It looks like a squat apple with the russeted crust, the rim around where the stem is. Tastes fantastic. It's one of the best balanced apples there,
Mm.
but it doesn't look great. So the Granny Smith came along. If they're both
Yeah.
green apples, the Granny Smith came along that's uniform in shape, thick skin, easy to pack, easy to ship, and pushed the Newtown Pippin out of the fresh market. So
Yeah.
nobody plants and grows Newtown Pippins anymore. So we're the only growers on the West Coast who grow the Newtown Pippins at commercial scale
Wow.
because they're a fantastic flavor variety. They just don't look very attractive, but they
Yeah.
taste great. So that dynamic, people talk about heirloom varieties and understand the value, I think, of heirloom varieties. But what was interesting to me, the shift to the varieties that dominate the market now was driven by automation in the packing houses and the need to have more uniform looking and uniform shaped products and apples that could actually be packed through automated packing lines versus what historically had been the case. And I'd never understood why we moved away from heirloom varieties, but that was one of the major drivers was the automation in the industry that was introduced throughout the 80s and 90s.
Yeah. That I have been thinking a lot about that lately. There's been a big debate about raw milk and just learning about like why we had to start shipping pasteurized milk in the first place. And a lot of it was just like transportation logistics and
Yeah,
the demand of growing marketplace and people
right.
shipping things much further. Yeah, I went to, while I was in Vermont, I went to a farm called Scott Farm. I don't know if you're
Okay.
familiar, but
I'm
they
not.
grow, I can't remember now, but over 200 varieties of apples. And there were apples as small as my like pinky finger, all the way up to different sizes and all
Yeah,
the different colors, and just thought that was like so magical and
yeah,
something that really not a lot of people are ever going to see. Just it
yeah.
is kind of going extinct. So
I think
I
that's right.
do I do love hearing that Martinelli's does grow some unique varieties. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, it's great. So it's what allows us to
Yeah.
maintain that unique flavor.
So food brands, especially bigger brands, become faceless pretty quickly. Even myself, I've been buying Martinelli's from the grocery store It just tastes the best, but didn't really know like a whole lot about the story
Yeah.
until kind of having to go that extra step and, yeah, like you said, get to know where my food comes from and dive deeper.
Yeah.
Um, but just for the person listening, what do you wish that they understood, especially about Martinelli's, but in general about the individual people who grow their food, the individual growers behind every bottle?
Yeah. I wish people knew and that we are a family-owned business. Most people assume we're part of a big corporation. When you think about all of our growers, whether it's grow orchards that we grow or whether it's third-party growers here in the Central Coast, there is also a similar depth of heritage that many of our third-party growers are third and fourth generation family growers, and that the apple industry in California, different from Washington, it's much smaller and it's much more, I'll say boutique, but they're smaller growers, family-owned growers that have sort of taken this trade from generation to generation. And what that means, there's a different level of care and pride in what they're doing
Mhm.
than than in some companies that we've seen out there. Certainly, there are great companies in the Northwest that make great fruit, grow great fruit, but here in the Central Coast, also a family business is growing apples, and it's been that connection, family to family, people to people, orchard to table, if you will, is really unique to what we do and how we make our product and the care and and passion we have for what we do. And that's it truly is unique. I wish we need to do a better job, and we're investing in doing a better job of telling our story because yeah, there are other firms maybe out there in different industries, I'm sure, that take this kind of care, but it's quite unique in the Apple industry
Yeah.
to be able to have a business that has this much focus and passion and making sure that we've got the best apples, the best orchards servicing our consumers to make the best juice possible.
Best juice, yeah. Yeah, I think people listening will probably want to just go try it just because it's a fascinating story, but it really
Yeah.
is just the crisp flavor. It's kind of unlike anything that you can at least find on a grocery shelf, you know.
Yeah,
It does taste very much like if you were to press your own apple juice,
that's right.
or better, all the flavors, all the different
Yeah.
varieties. So, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think that listeners might be your new biggest fans for
Great. I hope so. If they
definitely.
ever find themselves near Monterey or Santa Cruz, California, we have a tasting room. They can come in and taste all of our different products and would love to welcome them here with a tour.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank
Good.
you.
I appreciate the time and interest. And it was really a pleasure to meet you and talk about what we do. Have a great day, Hannah. Thank you.